Alright, we're going to do read 6 and 7 together. Um, this is your instruction manual for 020-023-01-001-01, Revision 01. Implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act, Department of Homeland Security, and we're going to read emergency actions. Alright, part 6. Emergency accident. The Department of Homeland Security mission include the insurance of reliance of the disaster effective of the emergency response. With example, the emergency is required for the immediate Department of Homeland Security action include the response for the hurricane effect, earthquake, pandemic, nuclear strike, the imminent threat of the terrorist action, imminent release for the oil hazard, biological, radiological substance. Is included required for the Department of Homeland Security action to defend and protect the public health, safety, and ensure the continuity of the government operations as soon as possible. As the Department of Homeland Security develop the resolution of the situation involved with the implementing immediate threats of the human and environmental safety, immediate threats are available natural resources within consider whether the sufficient time to evolve the procedure that establishes whether the Council of Environmental Quality further within explain with the Environmental Quality Memorandum ahead Federal Department Agencies Emergency National Environmental Policy Act May 12, 2010, and then it gives you an e-link in this instruction manual. The following four phrases apply with the National Environmental Policy Act during the emergency components filed with the General Provision, Emergency Action, Consultation, Respect for the Environmental Planning Program, Manager of the Office of General Counsel, and the Sustainable Environmental Programs when appropriate in accordance with the supplemental instruction and emergency procedure that is prescribed therein. Hey, secure lives and protect property. Do not delete immediate actions needed to secure lives and safety employed with the citizens and protect property. The components considered the probable environmental consequence to propose the Department of Homeland Security action minimize environmental damage to the maximum degree practicable, consistent in protecting human life and property to national security. B. Determine the applicability of the National Environmental Policy Act. Components determined by the advice of the Council of the Office of General Counsel with the National Environmental Policy Act apply with the Emergency Action Section 5, Part A. Notification of the Sustainable Environmental Program. Components filed with the criteria Section 4, Part C, with the notify and seek approval of the directive of the sustainability of the environmental program, the National Environmental Policy Act, activities during an emergency. D. We determine the level of the National Environmental Policy Act evaluation. The National Environmental Policy Act would apply with the proposed Department of Homeland Security Emergency Action Component to determine the approval of the level of the National Environmental Policy Act evaluation using the following criteria. If the proposed emergency act qualifies as the category excluded, but the extraordinary circumstances will preclude the use of the category exclusion following the procedure Section 5, Part B, completing the category exclusion review. Proposed emergency action does not develop the category exclusion. Consider the potential environmental effect that must be documented in the form of environmental impact assessment and impact statement. Consider procedure action for the proposed existing environmental impact assessment and finding of the non-significant impact or environmental impact statement. The record of the decision prepared with the Department of Homeland Security component with the existing Department of Homeland Security environmental assessment, finding of the non-significant impact or environmental impact statement. The record of decision full of the both of the scope of the proposed activity for the environmental impact. The environmental impact evaluation remains current with no further evaluation of the National Environmental Policy Act is necessary. However, the appropriate internal record of the use of the Department of Homeland Security component of the National Environmental Policy Act document. In the paragraph A with above, the applicable determine the proposed emergency act is covered with the existing environmental assessment, environmental impact statement, federal agency environmental impact statement, environmental and assessment of another federal agency fully covered both the scope of the proposed activity. The environmental impact with the current environmental impact evaluation remains current with the component that may adopt the documentation of adopting the existing analysis of the may require the component to provide opportunity with the public comment. The comment component provides the separate finding of non-significant impact with the record of decision proposed emergency when adopting the existing analysis. If the paragraphs the A and B of the above are not applicable, determine the existing environmental assessment and environmental impact statement. The firm of the Department of Homeland Security component environmental impact assessment impact statement adopted with another federal agency can be supplemental address with the proposed emergency action. Supplementing the existing analysis may require the component to provide opportunity to public comment. The component prepares the separate finding of non-significant impact of the record of the decision proposed emergency supplemental existing program analysis. Alright, in paragraphs A through C above the not applicable, the expected environmental impact was not considered significant to determine the sufficient time in the existing for starting action completing the new environmental assessment, except for the time exists for the most appropriate for the component to prepare. Focus concise with the environmental assessment, include with the consideration public involvement of the factors sections 4, Part G1, the environmental impact may incorporate the reference existing relevant non-federal impact evaluations such as one prepared pursuant to the state agency environmental planning. Requirement of the National The new environmental assessment support with the collusion with the proposed emergency action will not have significant environmental effect for the finding of a non-significant impact if the prepared made available to the interested party. 2. If sufficient time does not exist to complete the environmental assessment before starting a proposed emergency action, the environmental impact of non-considered to be significant component, consult with the director with the substantiating of the environmental programs to develop the alternative approach to completing the environmental assessment, meet the requirements of the Council of the Environmental Quality Regulation of the Instruction Pay Manual of the maximum extent of the practical research of the approach of the exert of the public notification involved in the focus of the minimize the virtual environmental consequences of the proposed aid emergency action, substantial environmental programs, inform the Council of the Environmental Quality of the alternative to the preparation environmental assessment earliest opportunity. If there are any attempt during the emergency, include during the preparation of the environmental assessment, determine the emergency action period with a major federal action with a significantly effective with the quality with the human environment, the component seek with the environmental substantiated environmental programs of the environmental impact statement is not available to adopt the supplement or insufficient time to adopt the supplemental and existing environmental impact statement. The substantiated environmental programs notify the Council of Environmental Quality regarding the emergency, seeking alternative arrangements to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act according to the Title 40 CFR 150611, and alternative agreements of the apply only with the actions needed for the control of the environmental impact of the emergency, prefer that the prevent further harm to life of the approved property or the other actions remaining subject to the National Environmental Policy Analysis factors address the crafting alternative arrangement, including the nature of scope of the emergency action needed to control of the immediate impact of the emergency, potential adverse effects of the aspect of the National Environmental Policy Act, process of the eval the data of the decision-making process, such as coordinate with the resource of the regulatory agencies and public, 5, the duration of emergency, and 6, the potential adverse impact mitigation measures. Alright, 7. The review of the application personnel organization outside of the Department of Homeland Security. The component for the process for the applicant for the permanent pilot license for the other than use for the real property, the federal assistance for the grants, the other form of the Department of Homeland Security funding approval, the responsibility and the of the National Environmental Policy Act requirement earlier in the application process. In this context, the application personnel organization outside of the Department of Homeland Security seeking the funding of the permanent license for the other form of the approval of the Department of Homeland Security in order to carry out this desired action. Component for the consider of the environmental effect of the applicant and proposed action for the decision whether or not to provide funding of the issue with the permanent license, otherwise approve of the applicant process of the completion of the National Environmental Policy Act with the process curve of the foremaking process of the approval of the applicant proposal, unless otherwise specified with the law, regulation, components of the administrative federal assistance, permitting licensing, similar types of the programs incorporated with the applicable provisions below with the respective review of the approval process for the application and of the program components of the regular administrative such program describe supplemental instructions how the provisions that normally address the components do not regularly administer with such program that nevertheless alike with the development of the supplemental instruction or to amend supplemental instruction if they wish to seek with the delegation of the National Environmental Policy Act with authorities of such program. The National Environmental Policy Act related programs, specifically guidance, policy, and etc. already exist. Components include the explanation, relevant information, reference of the document in their supplemental instruction. Alright, coordination between the component of the applicant is easily assessed as possible with the applicant was aware of the possibility and, if any, of the domain of the component of the fulfilling the National Environmental Policy Act, would include the notification applicant for the kind of analysis of the information for the component required of the applicant to provide and prepare, if at any of the time deemed necessary, with the appropriate over the environmental impact evaluation, the component established for the internal process for the serve of the component, usually for the independent object for the evaluation, such information provided to the applicant, but the may include notify the applicant of the role of the if any reporting coordinated with the consultant effort scoping the public involvement in the activities of the rules and if any of the activities necessary to eliminate duplication of tribal, state, local, and federal requirements. Consideration where the applicant proposed action is connected action Title 40 CFR 1508 25 applicants down federal entity in a piece of the large action where the components involved in the would federalize with the entire action. See for the process of identify the evaluate option as a result of the potential significant environmental impact, including the applicant's role in the coordinating nation. Following activity include the development of the measure for the mitigate with the adverse impact for the necessary D with the notification application for the how to cover the National Environmental Policy Act with the A preparation for the environmental assessment mitigation measure that are to be paid for. Notification for the applicant responsible regarding the emergency action relevant. The notification component of the application chain with the scope of the proposed action with the scope of the change with the required evaluation of the Department of Homeland Security with the determined with the previous National Environmental Policy Act for the analysis of still relevant additional necessary. Ensure the required National Environmental Policy Act for the documents complete with the prior with the component decision applicant for the case of the federal assistance in the program prior to the component approval of the applicant. Draw funds to execute for the proposed action notification applicant for the component made it denied for the applicant for the proposed action impact for the cover the environmental impact of the evaluation cover the mitigation measure for the subsequent outweigh for the proposed action cover the monetary non-monetary benefits. Ensuring mitigation committed with the National Environmental Policy Act with the process with including the appropriate amount with the implementation success of the mitigation and incorporated with the condition of the appropriate formal approval with the documentation of the issue with the applicant with the component of the notification of the applicant with the component of the made denied with the application revoking of the approval, obligated with the recoup of the granting fund with the take other enforcement action if the applicant does not comply with the National Environmental Policy Act with the requirements of the condition of the National Environmental Policy Act, approval of the implements proposed action prior to the completion of the National Environmental Policy Act process, identify the decision for the National Environmental Policy Act with the, and also the approval of the components overall application review and approval award process. Make contact information publicly available to the Department of Homeland Security Office to establish the reasonable administrative federal assistance permitting license similar type of the program. When actions are planned with a non-federal entity, the Department of Homeland Security involved with the Department of Homeland Security involved in the reasonable foreseeable for the provisions of the apply, ensure information staff available to divide with the potential applicants, consult early tribe, state, and local agencies and the public, and the commencement of National Environmental Policy Act process at the earliest possible time. Federal assistance permitting and license similar type of the program created with the Department of Homeland Security. Relevant component include with the relevant individual program office with the respect of the engineering planning program manager of the Office of General Counsel to determine the applicability of the National Environmental Policy Act requirements for the under the new program. In some cases, the responsibility administrator of the program may be transferred from one Department of Homeland Security component to another Department of Homeland Security from a Department of Homeland Security to another federal agency. In such situation, the parties may execute an agreement to ensure the National Environmental Policy Act requires are met. And it goes into the Appendix A, the Department list of category exclusions. And then a list of environmental planning requirements and record of environmental consideration template category excluded actions. And this has been a reading of the last reading in the instruction manual 0230101. Instruction manual 02301001001 revision 01 implementation National Environmental Policy Act, Department of Homeland Security.